In the early 2010s, a YouTube channel called Illuminati the Movie uploaded a series of videos on ancient knowledge. This series examined topics exploring mysteries on the nature of our reality, uncovering revelations on the underlying mathematics behind what operates everything. It showed what civilizations of the past understood that today's humans have forgotten. This series revealed some of the code behind the program, so to speak. Whoever it was that compiled all of this had evidently done hours upon hours of research to create one of the most thought-provoking channels to ever hit YouTube. Back in the day, I watched this series as its videos dropped. Each video gave me a ton to think about. It was all an introduction to various ideas. Many may naturally be skeptical of what is presented in these videos, which is in part what makes them interesting. Some will claim this information is outdated. Well, no worries, the word ancient is literally right there in the series title. These videos touch on perspectives most people do not usually think about. Therefore, I am not selling you for or against these ideas. The only thing I am selling you on is that these ideas are interesting to think about, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the totality of them. The series was impactful to me simply on the basis that it invoked a sense of wonder. Wonder is something we experience a lot less as we grow older because there is less to wonder about. This series, however, gives somebody a lot to wonder about. In recent weeks, I revisited this series to understand why I appreciated it so much. So here is a brief review of the Ancient Knowledge series. As I present these ideas, I will be quickly firing off a lot of information, some of which we may not be able to make connections to until later parts of the series. Again, the majority of what I present here are ideas that are presented in the series. I will be describing what the creator of this channel included in these videos, some of which is text they put on the screen to make sense of the specific ideas they are presenting. For me to even attempt to summarize the magnitude of this series will fall short in some ways. Inevitably, my explanations of certain scientific concepts related to physics or chemistry will be limited. The thesis is stated to express appreciation of this series by running through a brief, keyword brief, review. So how did this series begin? What is part 1 about? Part 1 examines consciousness, sacred geometry, and cymatics. It sets the stage on the vitality of expanding consciousness to gain more awareness and understanding of this reality, brings up the idea of mind behind matter, as opposed to matter behind mind. If you amplify a frequency, the structure of matter will change. It visualizes this by showing an oscillating wine glass by playing sound at its resonance frequency, causing the glass to move, change, liquefy its structure, and even break it. Watching this looks like magic being played out. Sound is the basis of form and shape. Matter took shape from sound. Shows a pattern of sand over a speaker playing certain frequencies, aka cymatics, a word that will be used a lot throughout this series. The word word, is a symbolic for sound frequency. Words form frequency, and words are powerful. I mean, obviously words are powerful, but words hold far more power than we even realize. I mean, just look at the first words people put in the Bible. In the beginning was the Word. People knew for a long time words were pretty powerful. We get into a comparison of sound frequency patterns to ancient art of sacred geometry. Pinpointing there's a deeper meaning to these patterns. There's some text on screen displaying that matter does not exist and the substance of the universe is consciousness. There's a fear-greed dichotomy that's influencing people to be blinded by materialism. Next, we see what I think is a clip from the documentary called Chromatica, which from what I remember, was something made by a stoner dude and his brother. I'm definitely interested in checking out that documentary again. This dude talks about the seemingly non-physical aspect of reality. Some ideas included are that consciousness shapes reality, the education system is more left-brained and lacks some right-brain perspectives, preventing students from inquiring about information, and instead enforces how regurgitating information to be memorized for tests rewards the obedient students. There's a suppression of the feminine in this reality, specifies emotions are part of the intangible reality, which are part of the true higher consciousness, that we don't experience our actual emotions, but instead experience the physical side effects / manifestations of them. Final idea from Cymatics presented is that all emotions stem from just two: fear and love. Next, we look at what the DNA code looks like between people living in fear and people living in love. We're presented with the phantom DNA experiment. Photons get on the shape of DNA, but remain in that shape in a vacuum, even if you remove the DNA. Emotions affect the structure of DNA, and the structure of DNA affects the physical world. A change in the heavenly bodies was a mirror into the change of all existence. As above, so below. DNA is an antenna for photons. There's a metaphor here. Lighting a candle in a dark room lights up the room, but you cannot do the opposite. This metaphor explains our true power. So we see how some powers that be try to divide us. What is the solution? Well, it shows an image. It says, "Love is the key," which is actually the same profile picture for this very account. The final thing in part 1 is a scene from the 1999 movie Instinct, where a man forces another man to write down, "What have you lost? What did I take from you?" After failing multiple times by frantically writing down the wrong thing, he finally gets the right answer by writing, "My illusions." Part 2 begins with a clip from the Zeitgeist documentary by Peter Joseph. This clip shows Jiddu Krishnamurti talking about listening fully. Next, we see video roll of a clip from a scientist from either the 1950s or the 1960s talking about the atomic structure of matter. He presents ideas on magnetism and resonance, displaying matter as mostly empty space, and atoms are small solar systems, just as our solar system is mostly empty space. The scientist talks about how with particle structure, he should be able to run right through a wall, but he cannot do that, not because of a collision of particles, but because of a collision of forces. There's an idea that there are two worlds occupying the same space at the same time, with each world being unaware of each other. Atomic forces would not be interactive. Again, talks about the nature of magnetism, and how different types of metals react differently. He fries an egg on a cold hot plate, based on the nature of how the coils work, showing how physical forces are quite selective. The ancients were fully aware of the non-physical world and the invisible energies around us, and they incorporated this knowledge into their art designs. And we see some of this ancient art displaying sacred geometry. At a couple points in the series, the creator presents some nouns, and here is where the first noun is presented. These are symbolic representations of unseen forces at work. Symbolic representation is something visible that by association or convention represents something that is invisible. It mentions how ancient artwork portrayed these symbolic representations of complex energy flows and their behavior. And at this point, I'm wondering, what in the Graham Hancock am I watching? That dude would love this series. We get into the significance of the Fibonacci sequence and how a recurring pattern shows up a lot in nature. All our senses rely on Fourier transfer, which is a similar mathematical pattern that happens in the brain. The deeper you go, mathematics becomes the ultimate way to describe this reality. We see examples of these reoccurring mathematical patterns in nature, including the Fibonacci sequence, golden ratio, sacred geometry, and phi. Provides an explanation of the Fibonacci sequence. Suggests DNA is an exemplification of the golden ratio. We see the measurements of fingers compared to arms in relation to the golden ratio. A lot of these ratios appear on the human body. Someone mentions that Wikipedia leaves out information due to conspiracy to hide us from these revelations. This man mentions we're taught junk geometry in school, which is not relevant geometry. This relevant kind of geometry is not even taught in mathematical PhD programs. There are things in nature related to this formula of phi 1.618. These things include seahorses, seashells, flowers, hurricanes, tornadoes, and galaxy spirals. 1.618 is also the divine proportion / golden ratio. There's a golden ratio in teeth, golden ratio on the arm, on a pine cone, on a pineapple, and on a hand. Back in school, math class was always the place you least wanted to be. If the teachers actually presented how learning math relates to learning the fundamentals of existence, maybe kids would have actually seen a point to studying in these classes. Maybe these teachers wouldn't have been as dry and bland as we generally remember them to be. There's some text here talking about how we can heal ourselves by believing we can. Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you are probably right. There's a doctor talking about the power of the placebo effect. There's a dude talking about spontaneous generation. Talks about how the mind brings in matter rather than matter bringing in mind, per George Wald quotes. Next we see a man talking about the nature of DNA, that man being Ken Ham. What? You aren't a fan of Creationist Museum founder Ken Ham? The issue a lot of creationists run into is they'll make these fairly reasonable claims about how the institution of science can ironically become a bit dogmatic, wants to stick to its preconceived notions, ironically fails to fully utilize the scientific method. And one may say, okay, I can understand how that could happen, and I can definitely see how that's an issue. Many creationists will then say, exactly. That is why you should derive your conclusions from this ancient book in which you base your hypotheses off of. Then one would say, well, wait, hold on a minute, I think we skipped a few steps. Doesn't that take us right back to square one? Thinking dogmatically and failing to approach life in a scientifically methodical manner? And the creationists say, well, it's not that the book becomes outdated, it just becomes a little more symbolic every consecutive century for some reason. So then perhaps both the scientists and creationists fall into the culture of limitations in thinking. Both groups should then encourage questioning everything if they truly want people to gain an understanding of this reality. Long story short, if I edited this series, I would not have included the creationist type verbiage due to these connotations. Next we see a man talking about how we started out as one cell and built a body with trillions of cells in it. Mentions how DNA is a self-correcting structure. There's audio of a guy talking about the mystery of how atoms compose molecules. Professors are unable to really explain why this works. I mean, they can show some diagrams, but they're not able to fully explain it coherently. There's no known relationship between quantum particles and the things they compose. This suggests quantum physics is more a form of philosophy than science due to its lack of empirical evidence. If this sounds crazy, this idea is far more clearly presented in a video by a channel called Formscapes. This video titled When Science Became Unscientific, which outlines how humanity knows way less about quantum physics than we thought. I highly recommend checking out this channel. Part 2 finishes by showing a Carl Jung quote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Part 3 was nowhere to be found on YouTube. I had to find this on archive.org. This was probably removed because 90% of it is literally just some documentary a production company made. This documentary is all on the pyramids. It starts out by mentioning 7 feats of engineering when building these structures. Feat 1, leveling the ground to fit many strangely shaped slabs. Each one is heavy as a car. Feat 2, the people that built the pyramids had to have carried massive granite blocks over 500 miles. Feat 3, 3 chambers are inside the Great Pyramid with passageways cut directly through the rock. Feat 4, builders worked with more than 2 million pieces of stone, making accurate building far more difficult. The upper chamber is perfectly horizontal and vertical somehow. Feat 5, the position is completely precise, pointing directly north. Feat 6, the pyramid actually has 8 sides, which is far more difficult to build than a pyramid with 4 sides. Feat 7, the pyramid only took 20 years to build, which is super fast when you realize no wheels existed at this time. Whoever built the pyramids had knowledge of electrical power and magnetism. They were true masters of sound and frequency. Egyptologists and historians still have more questions than answers as to how these megaliths were created. I mean, a razor blade couldn't even fit between 2 blocks because they were laid so precise. Something wild is that these blocks actually mirror each other on opposing sides of the corridors, inferring these shapes were carved as they were on purpose. Something that is less discussed is the black bedrock nearby the pyramids with unusual cuts. It looks like cuts made by modern machines. Same with some nearby rocks having holes cut into them that appear to have been done by machine, but we have no evidence to prove machines existed at this time. There's an unfinished obelisk about 500 miles away from the pyramids. A strange place to put a Washington monument, am I right? The statue of Luxor is completely symmetrical and contains complex geometrical patterns. There's a location in Peru with what appears to be a similar pyramid, but this has not been fully excavated yet. There are also unusually shaped skulls, similar to skulls that have been found in Egypt. Were these even human? We see a visualization of how these type of sites kind of align with each other, 30 degrees to the equator. If you divide one dimension of the pyramid by another, you get the value of pi. The surface of the 4 sides divided by the surface of the base equals the golden number. We see a visualization of how wonders of the world compare with each other on the globe. So start to recap with text inferring Earth has an energy grid. We see a brief clip from a different documentary, this one focusing more on Earth's electromagnetic aspects. Finally, this part concludes with a clip of Michael Jackson saying how tired he is of the manipulation and the history books are lies. We then see an image that says truth is not measured in mass appeal. The description of Part 4 mentions full credits to Jeremy Stride of Code144.com. Please visit his website for more information. This is the official remake of Jeremy's original work from 2008, The Secrets of the Universe. Part 4 introduces Coral Castle, something we'll be talking about a lot through this series. Coral Castle was built by Latvian engineer Edward Leedskalnin, built by himself at Rock Gate Park in Florida. He cut the stone right out of the ground below. This is one of the great wonders of the modern world, as Ed was able to lift/move these large stones using only primitive tools. A quote by Ed is saying, "It's not difficult really. The secret is in knowing how." There are some clues Ed left around Coral Castle that would suggest how he built it. One of which is the admission sign at the entrance. He shortened the word admission to just ADM, which in numbers results to 144 when referring to the alphabet's number chart. It also mentions the way this sign is cut precisely. We can actually find the same information/clues in the Norman Hall Grand Lodge in Philadelphia. It's always sunny in the symbolism found in that lodge. We see an image showing a rotating wheel of magnets called a flywheel that Ed used to nullify the weight of enormous stones. This tool was made of U-shaped magnets divided into 24 parts. Shows how the shape of the hexagram is all over Coral Castle, and even found in the center of the flywheel itself. The poles of all the magnets on the flywheel are bent, so they point outwards, making 24 north poles and south poles pointing outwards, making 48 streams of magnets. 48 appears in multiple places in Norman Hall. Ed wrote a book called Magnetic Current in 1945, showing the way magnets work. I mean, an insane clown posse really had a point. Magnets, how do they work? We see some further comparisons between Coral Castle and Norman Hall, an interesting pattern appearing in Norman Hall on a chair, outside Coral Castle a sign saying ring bell, sun drawing having 16 points, the sun in Norman Hall with 16 points, pattern of a hexagram with a 16-fold pattern, 16 ripples surrounding a star at Coral Castle, a star with a bell inside it at Norman Hall, alignment of a coin slot at Coral Castle aligning with a star at Norman Hall, with the bottom point of star aligning with the top of the pillars. Here is the most important clue Ed left at Coral Castle. He engraved some numbers, 7129 and 6105195. The solution to this clue also relates to the golden ratio, square root of phi, Ed's 24-fold flywheel, resulting 16-fold pattern, pyramid and right angle, and prime quadruplets. This explanation will be dense and sporadic. The original series does a far more effective job of describing the significance of everything we present here, including Ed's engraved numbers, so feel free to skip to the next part of this review. Each magnet of the flywheel makes up 15 degrees. 360 divided by 24 equals 15. The two numbers Ed left can be separated out like this. 7129 becomes 7 and 129. 6105195 becomes 6, 105, and 195. We get into the concept of prime quadruplets, which are four normal prime numbers as close as they can possibly be. For example, 821, 823, 827, 829. There are only 7 prime quadruplets under 2000. Magic happens when we look at the center of each prime quadruplet. For example, the center of the quadruplet 821, 823, 827, 829 is 825. The centers of the 7 prime quadruplets under 2000 are as follows: 9, 15, 105, 195, 825, 1485, and 1875. So the pair 7 and 129 is the sequence of prime numbers, and the collection of 6, 105, 195 represents prime quadruplets and angles. We get into the concept of the prime sequence number, the position a prime number appears in the chronological order of prime numbers. The 10th prime number is 29, so 29 has a prime sequence number of 10. For example, the second prime quadruplet is 11, 13, 17, 19, and these have prime sequence numbers of 5, 6, 7, and 8. You can assign prime sequence numbers to the center of prime quadruplets as well. 105 and 195 both are at the centers of 2 consecutive prime quadruplets. We can find phi with the associated prime quadruplets, and this only works for 2 prime quadruplets from Ed's code, none of the others. The first prime quadruplet is 101, 103, 107, 109, and its prime numbers are at prime sequence positions of 26, 27, 28, 29. The prime sequence position of 105 becomes 27.5, and the prime sequence position of 195 becomes 44.5. What the hell does that mean? The ratio of 44.5 and 27.5 is precisely phi. This is why we have the relation of 105 and 195 in that collection of 3 numbers. Despite there not being many prime quadruplets under 2000, there are sets of prime quadruplets at prime sequence positions 144 and 288. There is significance to these numbers. 1.272, which appears in the pyramid dimensions, is the square root of phi. The series gets back into showing pictures from Norman Hall and Coral Castle, shows a lot of pyramid symbolism in Norman Hall. The 16-fold sun is based on a design of two squares. The energy pattern of the sun is what the pyramid interacts with. There's another version of the pyramid on the other side of Norman Hall, which is an artistic impression of how magnetic forces work. There's a visual representation of the pyramid on top of the Coral Castle flywheel. So here's the secrets of 6 and 7 in Ed's engraved code. Multiply each of these numbers by the number of divisions on the flywheel, 24. 6 times 24 equals 144. 7 times 24 equals 168. Each side of the pyramid is subject to the magnetism of 7 magnets. Prime numbers in both the 5th and 7th prime quadruplet are in position 144 and 288. We see a lot of large stones that Ed moved, claims the flywheel was only one part of Ed's technology. Closing thoughts. That was very dense, that was a lot of math and a lot of numbers thrown at us. Let's see what the next part is about. The introduction of this part states that the information here is going to be unrelated to the information presented in the previous part. Thank God for that, man. That last part was intense. That was a lot of numbers. So, first off, we see Dr. Bruce Lipton talking about humanity's extinction. Wikipedia doesn't seem to like this guy, which always seems to make somebody more interesting for some reason. Lipton claims the knowledge we've operated from the last few hundred years is a misperception of reality. Similar to how an anorexic views themselves as overweight, this is where we are in how we view ourselves. There are 3 big misconceptions he touches on. Misconception 1. The material realm is all there is, making us believe matter is all there is. Invisible stuff shapes matter in the same way a magnet can cause the shaping of some materials. Our mind is like a magnetic field. Misconception 2. Genes control our lives, making us victims to something we believe holds power over us. This makes us irresponsible because we don't think we can control ourselves. Our mind controls ourselves through epigenetic control. Misconception 3. The world is a nightmare struggle for survival. Evolution, in actuality, is based on cooperation, except for humans that like to hoard resources. Humans are the ones out of the garden, in a sense. Lipton gets into how cells are like people and all cells have a job. Again, mentions this new science of epigenetics. We're told this next segment will piss some people off, but to keep an open mind. We see an interview on an old talk show questioning the Darwinian theory of evolution. The expert here is American freelance researcher Michael Cremo, author of Forbidden Archaeology, the hidden history of the human race. He argues there was an existence of modern humans on Earth as early as 30 to 40 million years ago, whereas the Darwinian theory states humans have only been around for 100,000 years. Again, Graham Hancock would be loving this series because this is a big thing he's talked about. I had never heard of the idea of humans being around for millions of years. I mean, I grew up with some people who thought humans were around for under 6,000 years somehow, but as for millions of years, never heard of that. We're looking at a pretty wide range here. Cremo states he has taken his earliest inspirations from ancient Sanskrit writings from India called the Vedas, which outline human civilizations on the planet going back millions of years. This spawned an 8-year archaeology research program, and Michael claims archaeologists buried as much as they dug up. The interviewer states we should never be afraid to investigate opposing points of view. We see another interview with Michael on New Orleans' The Morning Show. He states that during the gold rush, miners were digging up rocks that were 10 million years old and were finding human skulls in them. A book on this was published by Harvard, but was suppressed. The interviewer asks him the question we're all wondering, why someone would want to suppress this information. Michael claims it's because of power, prestige, and money. This would destroy everything we believe to be true about human history as taught from the last 150 years. We see a snippet from physicist David Bohm stating modern science has become very strict in its philosophies. Ironically, we go back to another Michael Cremo interview talking about found remains of humans from rocks dating back millions of years. Interviewers again ask what scientists have to gain by distorting findings, to which Michael explains there are pressures of conformity. He goes into how the scientific community will often resort to calling others crackpots who report alternative findings without actually discussing the ideas, the rationale for why others are crackpots, which should, in hindsight, seem to alleviate the crackpots that are out and about. He mentions how the scientists he's met who've discovered these things have been treated unfairly in the community. We get back into the David Bohm interview, claiming the emerging views of the universe see itself more as a whole rather than independent parts. We get into comparing the concepts of theory and reality. For example, on a map, a city is visualized with a bunch of dots, and the concept of a city is very vaguely defined. Fun fact, this David Bohm guy actually obtained his PhD at the University of California, Berkeley, in the theoretical physics group directed by J. Robert Oppenheimer. Bohm states all worldviews need to be questioned, states some of the Eastern worldviews need incorporated into the Western worldviews, as Western focuses too much on analysis/fragmentation. A fragment is divided, unlike a part. A part makes up something of the whole. We see another interview with Dr. Bruce Lipton. Lipton talks about his early experience as a biologist cloning stem cells in 1967. He put one stem cell in a petri dish and it would divide itself every few hours. He took some cells and put them in a different dish with a different environment, and the cells formed muscle. In a separate environment, they formed fat cells. In a separate environment, they formed other parts of a living being. The environment controlled the fate of cells, which contradicted what he was teaching. His colleagues discouraged him, so he left the university in 1970. He again mentions epigenetic control is the new science, unlike genetic control, which is what he was teaching. What's the solution? How do we utilize this information? Lipton tells us how. There are two parts of the mind, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. We only run on our conscious mind about 5% of the time. The fundamental programs in the subconscious mind are constructed in the first 6 years of our lives, as the conscious part of the mind isn't fully formed until 6. Before 6, we are just a camcorder, soaking in everything, building our preconceived notions. We are in pure observance of our surroundings. If you can notice your subconscious thoughts and try to filter the lies or negativity, you can improve yourself. We need to stay present, aka mindful of what is happening. This is a habit that needs to be practiced, and one that takes work. Bruce describes himself as the happiest man in the world because he has applied this new science. He has not been to a doctor in 20 years, as he states most illness is derived from stress, from not living in harmony. Finally, in this part, we see how the phrase, "get 'em while they're young," is how we're manipulated in this lifetime. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla. Nobody really knows what energy is, but we know it exists. and we have formulas to predict what it does in various forms. We only know how to mathematically describe the characteristics of its various manifestations. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to another. We see a few quotes from theoretical physicist Richard Feynman. To those who do not know mathematics, it is difficult to get across a real feeling as to the beauty, the deepest beauty of nature. If you want to learn about nature, to appreciate nature, it is necessary to understand the language that she speaks in. We see Feynman resign from the National Academy of Science as he felt the organization spent more time deciding who to let in rather than spending time devoted to science. We see the idea that science is not a leader, but a follower of something larger than itself. We are introduced to the Tablet of Shamash, aka the Sun God Tablet. Apparently, this accurately depicts a Cymatic frequency in great detail, and modern archaeologists and historians are not aware of this fact. We see a video of sand on top of a speaker. The speaker is playing various tones, causing the sand to form different patterns. This is the visualization of sound. We see a comparison of sand on the speaker to the Tablet of Shamash. And then we see comparisons of Coral Castle to the Tablet of Shamash. We see that limestone was the material used to build Coral Castle. There's a video from code144.com. I don't think this website currently exists anymore, but this video contains rare footage from Coral Castle on 8mm film. This place was described to be created single-handedly for the love of a woman, as an everlasting monument to her. Ed states that he learned the ancient secrets of how the ancients built the pyramids. This is how he built Coral Castle, and nobody has been able to since replicate what Ed has done. There's an image that keeps showing of Ed next to a machine he built, points out some parts of the machine that are black and white. In addition to crystallographic space groups, there are also magnetic space groups, also called two-color crystallographic space groups. So on the Tablet of Shamash, the god that appears on there seems to be a seated giant, and there is archaeological evidence of these ancient giants. Whenever mythology speaks of sun gods, it's not referring to our sun, but the black sun, aka the planet Saturn. The sun god Shamash represents the planet Saturn. If you walk into a crowd of apes and yell the word mealtime, chaos will ensue. No, sorry, instead of crowd of apes, I meant to say group of esoteric thinkers, and instead of saying mealtime, I meant saying Saturn. If you walk into a group of esoteric thinkers and say the word Saturn, chaos will ensue. These people have some strong feelings about Saturn. As expected, Saturn is depicted in Coral Castle. We see a video on the Cassini mission, flagship-class robotic spacecraft which landed on Saturn's largest moon, Titan. It was found there is a hexagon on Saturn's north pole similar to Earth's polar vortex. Saturn's vortex can fit 4 Earths inside of it. It's possible to recreate this using Cymatic frequencies. We can see a video of this being done. Sound frequencies, again, are depicted in ancient art. Ancient texts suggest that Saturn was at one time our original sun, or at least a fixed central sun. After this is our first instance of hearing from Bill. Bill was from an old website called Occult Science 101. Bill is pretty recognized in circles that talk about this kind of stuff. He's an old, ornery, really crusty dude with some loud pet birds. He's an absolute badass, but he is quite crusty nonetheless. Bill shows the nature of hurricanes and suggests Hurricane Sandy from October 2012 was simulated. He shows how the March 2012 issue of The New Yorker is coded in symbolism all over it. Suggests what is on the cover may be exit points. Lots of natural disasters happening at the points on this cover, and he relates this to suggesting that there are things coming out of the cube of Saturn that are not human. Part 6 starts with that scene from A Few Good Men where that dude is yelling, "You can't handle the truth!" We see some magnet play, a magnet falling through a metal pipe and just kind of levitating in there. The series then introduces the magic of the number 9. If you want the most summarized course in numerology to have ever existed, here it is. Number 9. That is it. Natural number 9. Nice number 9. Naughty number 9, as depicted in Schoolhouse Rock. That is everything you need to know about numerology. 9. Numbers were not invented, but discovered. The number 9 is the last number in a base 10 system, which is the last and limit of all that is. 9 is a number which has many interesting qualities that other numbers do not have, and has been used to hold a hidden code that affects every person on Earth. The geometry of a circle relates to 9. 360 degrees, 3 plus 6 plus 0 equals 9. Resulting angles always come out to 9. Same with the resulting angles of all regular polygons. Vortex math relates to the flower of life, displaying the power of 3, 6, and, of course, 9. It infers we have found a model for subatomic vibration. 9 appears in the Fibonacci series. The 9 code is everywhere for us to see if we are willing to search for it. For those who have come to understand the code, have become the masters of wisdom, seen as men holding keys in ancient artwork. When you add numbers in a certain way, different patterns arise which create geometrical shapes. It seems that the construction of our universe revolves around the number 9 somehow, and this number comes up everywhere, just as a woman is pregnant for 9 months, displaying the 9 code. 9 is everywhere in the concept of time. We have 1,440 minutes in a day. 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 0 equals 9. If we add up the digits of a number until there is only one number left, we have found what is called the digital root, and used by the ancients called numerology, and used as a shortcut for solving certain math equations by organizing numbers. 9 plus any digit equals itself. You can arrive at the digit sum much faster if you drop out the 9. In other words, 9s in any combinations of numbers that add up to 9, they just disappear. We see a scene from a movie where two dudes are talking about math, talking about how math appears in everything. One guy mentions how the Hebrew language has letters that represent numbers. Adding certain numbers together is the same as adding certain letters together. The sums are equivalent in many cases. Again, words have this power we can't fully comprehend. According to Pythagoras, all is number, and languages use a numbering system, especially ancient languages using sacred geometry hidden inside the language, where the sounds of the words carry enormous power and can be decoded using numbers. Numbers are at the root of the language in the form of letters, so a mathematical expression can be written as words as well. A meme you will often hear people say is they say, "I used to be good at math until I started incorporating all those letters." Likewise with this, mathematics becomes far more complex when we see its relation to language. Even music and its Pythagorean tuning of middle C, 256 Hz, called A432 tuning, adds up to 9, and is congruent with the Fibonacci pattern, where the distance between notes are sacred, using physics, and was later changed to A440 for unknown reasons, which is said to be the result of a conspiracy to get people out of sync with nature. There are 13 minutes of Eric P. Dollard, an electrical engineer noted as the only scientist to recreate Tesla's work. He talks about polyphonic music, playing 2 or more notes simultaneously. Italian musicians discovered this. He gets into the creation of the organ keyboard and the nature of how they function, how they interact within a building's harmonics, and the effects it has on the people within those buildings. He talks about how musicians, such as Bach, have harnessed energy/time to create music that goes both backwards and forwards in time. There's something about the 432 resonating with the human body to give a spiritual experience and the church wanting to be the only ones to own that. Large cathedrals are specifically designed to enhance this effect/experience. All modern music instruments are tuned to A440, and it's a fact that 440 Hz does not work properly in music, but 432 Hz allows music to flow. If you have ever listened to binaural beats, aka music that makes you trip balls, you will notice that these multi-hour videos generally specify it is in 432 Hz. Fittingly, the digital root of 432, 4 plus 3 plus 2, is 9. The Earth is tilted at 23.4 degrees and has a wobble due to its bulging center, which is said to give us our 4 seasons, which I, by the way, don't think has anything to do with seasons, and Edward Leedskalnin did neither. Our Earth's North Pole points through 12 constellations in a 25.92 year cycle, broken up into 2,160 years per constellation. Depending on which constellation rises in the east behind the sun, determines what age we are in. Gets into constellations, brings up the debate about whether or not we are currently in the age of Aquarius or still in the age of Pisces. There are differing views on this. Fortunately, we can figure this out. We do have a range of time. Allegedly, the changing of ages is forecasted to be happening between the years 1447 and the year 3597. Okay, well, that doesn't really narrow it down too well, does it? It's also interesting to know that the more you surround yourself around a number, because it has magnetic qualities, it will attract things into your life with those same number qualities. You see it in Chinese Feng Shui. Also, learning how to control it and master it instead of controlling you was what Bruce Lee called enter the dragon. To enter a realm of energy by shape and form. The secrets of this knowledge is hidden inside religious books and secret societies through encryption. Also, just as this happens mathematically, it happens with events in real life and seen everywhere in our universe, nature and culture, even though most people have missed it. This code is universal, and the ancients knew about it and hid it in books, art, and buildings. Number 9 is, of course, everywhere in Coral Castle. There's significance of the number 144, digital root of 9, in respect to the Bible and the pyramids. There's a dude talking about the alignment of the structure for the pyramids. Mentions that Edward Leedskalnin only had a 4th grade education. Ed states that astronomers don't ultimately know what causes the seasons, despite us thinking it's because of Earth's tilt/orbit. A lot of information in part 6, but part 6 does not end there. This part examines some more introductory perspectives on the planet Saturn. Mentions there are several moons at Coral Castle, not just one. There's a woman talking about heat maps of Saturn's moons, Mimas and Tethys. These moons kind of look like Pac-Man. Shows how a triangle shape was similar to triangle shapes she's observed on the sun, and how the moon Mimas looks like the Death Star from Star Wars. Why did George Lucas do this? Well, people who are very creative have a power to tap into universal consciousness. It shows Saturn's hexagon vortex recreated in a lab using somatic frequencies, and you can see eddy currents in action. We see what eddy currents look like. We see a Wikipedia page for the trigonal crystal system. How did the ancient pyramid builders and Edward Leedskalnin cut and shape those enormous stones without iron tools? They were shaped by putting them into a special electromagnetic field. Shows more of Eric Dollard. He talks about how rocks within the Earth are like speakers. You can hear things coming out of them. We begin a segment on atmospheric ionization research. There's a video at Coral Castle of a metal wire being pulled by something in stone under the crescent moon. 2 people walk around with this wire to see how it reacts in different parts of Coral Castle. We see an alignment with the North Pole star of Polaris. Consciousness is an inherent part of energy, meaning that all energy contains consciousness. When quantum physicists do experiments on subatomic particles, they go absolutely crazy about the fact that particles know when they're being watched or measured and act differently. Also, all planets have massive consciousnesses and can think, and there's something else. Starts relating everything back to prime quadruplets. Oh boy, here we go with all that math again. Shows a scene from The Matrix where Neo is talking to Morpheus. This is one of the most iconic scenes in the film. Neo is coming to terms with his newfound reality. We hear some audio from Bill from Occult Science 101 stating he doesn't fully understand what's going on, but knows Saturn is responsible for what is happening. And the word sin is derived from quantum physics, derived from the word sine, as in sine wave. He visually represents this concept. So sine and cosine represent time and space. Sin equals sine equals time. And the intertwining of these waves look like the serpent symbolism. So when people say we are born into sin, perhaps there's a deeper meaning inferring we are born into sine/time. Bill mentions how people took a story of physics and twisted it to get the Bible we know today. The tree of life in Genesis is in actuality the Kabbalistic tree of life, and the serpent represented time. He says he can't just explain physics to anyone, so the Garden of Eden was a story created to make sense of concepts in physics. The natural question most would have here is that if there are multiple religions, multiple ancient holy scriptures, why are we just referencing the Bible? Well, first and foremost, it's because we're speaking English. Whether people love or hate this book, whether they agree or disagree with it, the mutual consensus in esoteric communities is that there is simply just more to the book than the general population realizes, regardless of whether that general population likes or dislikes what is in there. The last half hour of this part is the beginning of an audio recording titled Knowledge that was uploaded by an account called Adam Pants 2007. I have a completely separate video going deep into the creator of this account. Finally, in part 6.2, we see how different ancient archaeological structures from different parts of the world all have striking, strange similarities. Saturn, the Sun, and the Moon are all on the Kabbalah in positions 3, 6, and 9. Bill from Occult Science 101 tells us how the Old Testament is literally code, representing physics. We see how Tesla got his inspirations. Many of his inspirations were from the Bible, one of the last places you'd expect for this kind of thing. Per the last known living assistant of Tesla, Tesla gives full credit to God for his ability to discover some amazing new ideas in the Bible. As I have mentioned before, the microwave comes from the 4th chapter of Revelations. In many places in his work, Tesla mentions the fact that he was inspired by Bible study to conceive his amazing ideas. His idea of alternating current comes from the book of Matthew, and other words from the Trinity. Tesla explains that his microwave, for instance, is not what many others think it is. It is not a wave, it is a dimension, the actual dimension of the beam. Tesla clearly states that his microwave is a beam, which grows smaller. Tesla, in the article The Fairy Tale of Electricity, stated in regards to the arc, the records, though scanty, are of a nature to fill us with conviction that a few initiated at least had a deeper knowledge of amber phenomena. To mention one, Moses was undoubtedly a practical and skillful electrician far in advance of his time. When watching all this for the first time, one may naturally think, great, was this whole thing just religious propaganda? This is where the real conspiracies begin. We are in a culture that tells us this book can only be taken at face value. If you have an objective to get as many people as possible to look into this book, but you reject the possibility that there may be multifaceted meaning to it, this is how you influence people to never want to open that book. Perhaps immediately dismissing these ideas as sacrilegious with no further consideration does beg the question, how narrow is this gate? Incredible knowledge requires an incredible amount of wisdom and intellectual maturity. Therefore, we have to go through lessons first. We hear more from Bill, stating how people have to be eased into this kind of knowledge. It's hidden right in front of our faces. For example, The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars are occultic movies. Then we learn some history. We get into a deep dive of the Phoenicians, the inventors of the alphabet. Mentions how the Phoenicians built libraries and ruled the sea and became the greatest naval power in the Mediterranean. Among the thousands of tablets found within the walls of our giant places and libraries that the first alphabet in history was discovered. Evidently, the Phoenicians realized that human speech consists of a finite number of sounds. They simply enough created a symbol for each of these sounds. Well, not really that simple, as it took civilization 2,000 years to achieve this feat, let's say. All subsequent phonetic languages utilize most of the 30 symbols or letters. The Hebrew alphabet, when pronounced in the correct way and under the right conditions, will set up a vibrational frequency that will result in the letters manifesting themselves in the sand, salt, or whatever suitable substance is used in somatic experiments. There's a video of a woman singing some Mozart into a tonoscope, something that visualizes the vibration of sound. This song forms a 7-pointed star. We see some other Phoenician contributions to the world besides the alphabet. Some of these contributions include law school, mathematics, paper money, open seas naval vessels, purple dye, the largest Roman temple, the theory of the atom, and transparent glass. The Phoenicians called themselves Sons of the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a symbol of Freemasonry and appears in countless other cultures, traditions, and myths. Who were the Phoenicians? Where did they come from? And why is there so little information about these mysterious sea people when they have seemingly influenced the whole world? Someone trying to cover up their tracks? So we get into some symbology. Bill gets into a comparison of the modern church to Freemasonry. Then we see a string of images comparing symbolism in Catholicism to symbolism in fascist ideology from World War II Germany. Through translations, we see a comparison of the name Kronos/Saturn and the name Yahweh. This relates to something we saw in the tablet of Shamash. From a mythological point of view, the sun cross represents the black sun, aka Saturn. Sun gods in mythology do not refer to our sun, but the black sun. The Greek Helios and Roman Sol were initially terms for the ancient sun god Saturn. That sun was replaced by one we have today. In mythology, Saturn is portrayed as our original sun. It mentions the black cube in Mecca called the Kaaba. The same cube is found in the Vatican Square. These cubes kind of look like that hexagon found on Saturn's pole. This is where the Masonic circling the square expression comes from. Black was the color attributed to Saturn, which is why black robes are seen everywhere today. When you graduate from school, you wear a black robe, the same black robes worn by judges. The motorboards perched on top of graduates' heads represent the square motorboards used by Freemasons for their plaster. It was how temples were built. A school, just like a courtroom, is nothing more than a temple. It is a temple where the god Saturn is worshipped, but in conventional society, these details are covert, not overt. Alumnus is a Masonic word, and that is why when you graduate from high school or college, you become an alumni, an initiate in the greater order of the god Saturn. The next segment is just called Words of Wisdom, which is 22 minutes, yeah, 22 if you know, of people talking about their personal experiences, realizing this kind of knowledge. We see a montage of similar ancient architectures around the world. Part 6.3 finishes with a Tupac interview segment. I can assume this channel was called Illuminati the Movie after Tupac's final album. And then we are left with two quotes. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Ralph Waldo Emerson. The other quote being, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And this concludes what we currently have of this series. What does this all come down to? What is the message we learned from ancient knowledge? Above all else, we can see that there are potentially far more layers to this reality than we once understood. But are there actually deeper layers to this? Well, that is something for each and every one of us to find the answers to. It is something to wonder about, which is why this series is appealing. Many questions remain, such as how exactly were the pyramids and Coral Castle built? I don't want long and convoluted lessons, I want answers. I don't want a lengthy process of coming to an understanding. I want to be spoon-fed the results without comprehending them. That is a ridiculous premise, and there's no way to approach this topic that will not come off as immediately ridiculous. The parts on the pyramids and Coral Castle remind me of Formscape's video, Actual Magic is Actually Real Actually, where I have seen one of the most fascinating breakdowns of trying to answer this question. Formscapes infers people used to harness alchemy in such a way as to modify solids into liquids, thus explaining why these rocks are seemingly molded in such specific shapes. If you're interested in learning more, he gets into this around the 1 hour mark of this video. Highly recommend. But what about Columinati the movie? Has anything been happening with this account? The latest parts were published way back in 2013. In November 2015, this account uploaded a 13-minute interview with physicist David Bohm and provided a link to an official WordPress, which contained 6 blog posts posted during February 2015. Videos not on Columinati the movie's page, which I believe YouTube kept removing at the time, can fortunately be found on an account called Perceive Believe. Now, it's an interesting account name. Why does Columinati have the name it does? Because along with the Ancient Knowledge series, it made an interesting documentary fittingly titled Columinati the Movie. This is no longer on YouTube, but it can be found elsewhere, uploaded by a user named JD23455, with this as the message on their channel. Columinati the Movie was first uploaded to the YouTube channel Columinati the Movie circa 2012, but has since been removed. It is a counterpart to the Ancient Knowledge miniseries, some of which can still be found on the channel. The long-awaited Ancient Knowledge Redux, expected in March of 2021, remains unreleased. The content creator's last YouTube message early that year mentioned struggling with cancer. In 2023, I learned that KTM is still alive and says he is doing much better. That's when I realized, yeah, I should be looking at the actual content creator's account if I want to learn more about him. The oldest community post by KTM from 5 years ago says, "It's been how many years now? Well, those of you who remain patient, you are going to be rewarded after all. Many of you thought it would never come, but I'm here to prove y'all wrong. Ancient Knowledge Part 6.4 is coming, and it's a direct continuation. However, I won't throw out any release dates, but we're getting closer. Also, I wanted to let you know I'm going to change the name of this channel soon, so keep that in mind next time when you search for my channel. And for those of you who think the real KTM got hacked or died, well, I guess that's for you to find out once you see the new videos." Notable comments: "Wow, I haven't checked here in a while. Glad to see you are still with us. It's been so long. You always had a knack for being one step ahead and pointing people in the right direction in a step-by-step process. I'm sure you have struggled and most likely lost a lot over the years fighting cancer, but just maybe it has changed you for the better in ways you might not have imagined when it first happened. It is only through death that we gain life. It is only after we have lost everything that we are free to do anything. Anyway, I hope you are in a good place now." Another past post by KTM says, "Due to recent events and circumstances, I cannot sit back and watch it all unfold anymore. I must intervene. Therefore, I just wanted to let you all know that I slightly changed my game plan. I have to take precautions first, which means I'm going to build a website next, before releasing new content. A certain video that I have in store for you is not fit for YouTube due to the information/knowledge on recent events it contains, and it got several big German truther channels terminated because of it. Can't have that happen to me, at least not quite yet. So I see myself forced to build a website first so I can release this important information safely without possibly getting my channel terminated before I start to unleash new content here on YouTube. The current situation is so urgent that I see no other choice. Several official trailers for my upcoming Ancient Knowledge Redux documentary are scheduled for February. A very realistic release date for the full documentary is planned for March 2021. This one is the real deal. Yes, I know it's such a pain in the ass, still having to wait a little longer, and many of you have lost hope and whatnot, but I'm telling you, it's coming, and it will be more than worth the wait. After all, I didn't add the subtitle, a documentary that will stand the test of time, for nothing or just for fun. And for those of you who still didn't grow up and feel the urge to hate and talk nonsense, feel free to do so. In fact, I even went in and unbanned every single person/channel from the past. Just a few more weeks. We are very close now. Look at this image. You reach the very stairs which lead up to that which you have all been waiting for. It's almost within your grasp. Just a few more steps. What if I told you that true freedom is waiting for you at the very top? In another past post by KTM, he includes a PS. PS! All upcoming videos that are about to be released may or may not be coded in some way with knowledge intended only for a mere few. Depending on your level of understanding, you may or may not grasp the little additional extra hints, which is not necessarily a requirement in order to understand the core message of the documentary. Knowledge without wisdom is as power without self-control. Finally, we get to the latest community post on the channel from August 2023 that says, "A sign of life." I've been dealing with a lot and have changed my mind so many times about the release, for which I am truly sorry, not giving out any release dates anymore. It comes when it comes. He provides links to teasers for the coming parts of the series, as well as a Google Drive link to a GIF with a text that says Ancient Knowledge Redux. This post also contains the Latin text for "The truth will set you free." Few notable comments on this post. This channel completely changed my perspective on life and the way I move throughout the world. Thank you for that. I discovered this channel back around 2010 when the movie was like a 50-part series. To be honest, the Tupac reference was the thing that drew me in. Bro, yes, please! Half your videos have been taken down from YouTube, unfortunately. It comes when it comes? That's it? Dude, you've been saying that for nearly 10 years now. Are we supposed to wait for another 10? Awesome that you are still with us. Your videos are aging like fine wine. Every few years I return to them, and they resound the wisdom and knowledge that I require in life. Hey my friend, I'd like to thank you. I first stumbled upon you and your videos when they first came out over a decade ago, when everything was so different. My life, my demeanor, my thoughts and understanding, the way of the world in general, and most important was the internet itself. It was a time when real knowledge was actually shared and new discoveries could be made by those who seek them. Now this site and others like it are reduced to everyone making videos, podcasts, and just pointing out things that have been repeated over and over. All this for vanity, fame, and money. Nothing new is discussed and almost impossible to find. Channels like yours need to be sought out directly by name or they remain invisible. And most creators aren't even bothering to produce true content. I'm so glad to see you are still around, if it is still you, and I hope that you have been able to continue your creative process to share. A lot of depth to that statement. The internet is not the same place it was a decade ago. A lot of people are now just pointing out things that have been repeated over and over. It takes a major dumbass to take the immensity of the deep thoughts presented in this series and try to reduce it down to some crude review. It's unbelievable somebody could just create a video essay out of all of this. Can you believe somebody would possibly have the audacity to do that? Well, I can't. In conclusion, the series was in many ways a springboard for introducing me to a ton of content I found interesting. I have appreciation for the creator of this account for having done this level of research and editing it to create one of the most thought-provoking things I've ever seen. It has been some time since the creator has posted, but I certainly hope we can see more of him when the time is right. Above all else, the Ancient Knowledge series invoked a sense of wonder, something we haven't experienced since childhood, something that keeps us interested. Something that keeps us moving. Something that keeps us alive. Circling us back to asking the question, what all have we forgotten?